My name is Michelle. Let me tell you about one of the most emotional and unexpected nights of my life. It was a quiet Saturday evening, and I laid there staring at the ceiling, thinking about how much had changed lately. My husband Harry was away on a business trip for the next 3 months, so the house felt strangely empty. It had already been 2 weeks since I last saw him, and the loneliness weighed heavily on me. Suddenly, the sound of my bedroom door opening broke the silence and snapped me back into reality. I turned and saw a figure standing in the doorway. My 18-year-old son, Isaac, stood there gripping the doorframe, looking hesitant. He called out to me, and I immediately knew something wasn't right. I asked him what was wrong, but he didn't respond at first. He stood there frozen, then finally stepped into the room as if something was troubling him deeply. "I can't sleep," he said quietly. I knew something had to be bothering him. He rarely came to my room this late at night unless he was truly upset. My chest tightened as I sat up at the edge of the bed. "What's the matter?" I asked gently. He paused before sitting on the edge of the bed. He kept his eyes on the floor, shoulders hunched forward, hands nervously fidgeting in his lap. "Isaac, you know you can talk to me about anything," I said softly. He let out a shaky breath before finally saying, "It's hard to explain. I just haven't been feeling like myself lately. Everything feels heavy, and I don't know what to do." His words made my heart ache. He had always been the quiet, thoughtful type, keeping most of his feelings inside until he couldn't anymore. I kept my voice calm and steady. "What do you mean, honey?" I asked. He gave me a look filled with exhaustion and worry. "I don't know what's wrong with me. I feel like I'm carrying something I can't put into words. Like I'm stuck in my own head all the time." For a moment, I felt relieved, thinking maybe this was about stress from school or friendships. But as he kept talking, I realized it was much deeper than that. "I feel like I'm falling apart inside," he admitted, "and I don't know how to tell anyone because I don't want them to see me as weak." My heart broke a little hearing that. "Isaac," I said gently, "feeling lost doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." He nodded slowly, still avoiding my eyes. I told him, "You're carrying too much on your own. Maybe it's time to share it so it doesn't feel so heavy." He sat there for a long moment before saying in a trembling voice, "I think I'm dealing with anxiety, maybe even depression. I try to ignore it, but it doesn't go away. It's always there when I wake up and when I go to bed." I reached over and held his hand. "I'm so sorry you've been feeling this way. You don't have to handle this alone. We'll figure it out together," I promised. He swallowed hard and said, "I just don't want to disappoint you." "You could never disappoint me," I said firmly. "We all struggle sometimes, even adults. Especially adults." For the first time that night, his shoulders relaxed a little, like some of the weight had been lifted. I told him to stay in my room so he wouldn't feel so alone. He nodded, and we both lay there quietly until he finally fell asleep. That night changed something between us. It wasn't just about him opening up, it was about me realizing how much pain he had been carrying without anyone noticing. The next morning didn't feel real. I got up and started doing chores, hoping it would distract me, but my mind kept drifting back to our late-night conversation. When I walked into the kitchen, I saw Isaac sitting at the table, staring into a bowl of cereal, looking like he hadn't slept much. I said good morning, and he mumbled it back without looking up. I poured myself some coffee and sat down across from him. The air felt heavy with all the words we hadn't said yet. Finally, I spoke. "About last night, thank you for telling me how you feel. That was brave." He shifted uncomfortably. I didn't know who else to talk to." "You did the right thing," I said. "But I think we should find someone who can really help, like a counselor or therapist. Someone who understands what you're going through." He frowned. "What if they judge me?" "They won't," I assured him. "Their job is to help, not to judge. And you deserve help, Isaac." He nodded slowly, though I could see the fear in his eyes. Over the next few days, things were a little awkward. He kept to himself more than usual, but he didn't seem as heavy as before. It was like just telling someone had given him a small bit of relief. One evening, while I was making dinner, he came into the kitchen and said quietly, "I think I want to talk to someone, like you suggested." I turned to him and smiled softly. I'm proud of you. That's a big step. He shrugged, looking almost embarrassed. I just don't want to feel like this anymore. I know, I said, hugging him. And you won't have to. We'll find the right person together. From that night on, things started to slowly change. We scheduled an appointment with a counselor, and Isaac began opening up little by little, not just to the therapist but to me too. Some nights he would still knock on my door, not because he was lost in dark thoughts, but because he just wanted to talk. Sometimes we'd stay up late discussing life, school, friends, and even the future. It wasn't easy, and there were days when he still felt low, but I reminded him that healing isn't a straight line. It has ups and downs. What mattered was that he wasn't facing it alone anymore. Weeks later, I watched him laugh at something on his phone. A real laugh I hadn't heard in months, and I felt this wave of relief. My son was coming back to life, piece by piece, and I realized that night when he first knocked on my door might have been the scariest moment of his life. But it was also the beginning of him finding hope again. The weeks kept passing, and slowly, life at home began to feel a little lighter. It wasn't perfect, not even close, but there was progress. That was what mattered. Isaac started having more good days than bad ones, which felt like a victory in itself. Sometimes I would hear him in his room, talking to friends again, laughing softly at jokes, and it made me smile because just a few weeks earlier, there had been nothing but silence behind that door. One Saturday morning, we were sitting at the table eating breakfast. He was scrolling on his phone when he suddenly said, "Mom, I didn't realize how much I was holding in until that night I told you everything." I looked up from my coffee. Most people don't realize it and finally comes out, I said. That's why it feels so heavy for so long. He nodded slowly. I feel lighter now, not fixed, but lighter. That's a start, I told him softly. For a while, we both sat there in quiet comfort, the kind that doesn't need to be filled with words. Later that day, we went for a walk around the neighborhood. He used to refuse to go anywhere with me because he didn't want people to see him looking sad, but now he didn't seem to care as much. He told me about school assignments, a friend who had been checking in on him, and even a book he had started reading after the therapist recommended it. He said, "I think the thing that scared me the most was feeling like no one would understand." Did anyone understand? I asked. He smiled faintly. Yeah. Moment stuck with me. It reminded me how powerful just listening can be. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't solve everything. But being there, staying calm, not judging him, that had been enough to keep him from feeling alone. One evening, a couple of weeks later, he came home from school carrying a canvas and some paintbrushes. "What's all this?" I asked, surprised. "They told me at therapy to try expressing myself instead of bottling it up," he said with a small shrug. "So, I'm gonna try painting." I smiled. "I think that's a great idea." The first few times, he was frustrated because the paintings didn't look the way he wanted. He even threw one away. But then, he painted a picture of a storm clearing over a dark mountain, and he showed it to me with this nervous look, like he wasn't sure what I would think. I told him, "It looks like hope." He stared at the canvas for a long time after I said that. Over the next month, I watched as he filled 3 more canvases. All different. All full of emotion. It was like he had finally found a language for things he couldn't explain before. One day, he came into the living room and said, "Mom, can you keep a secret?" I laughed a little. "Depends on what it is." He held up his phone. "There's an art contest at school. I submitted one of my paintings." Widened. "Really? Which one?" "The storm one," he said quietly. I reached over and hugged him. "I'm proud of you, Isaac. No matter what happens, I'm proud." A few weeks later, he came rushing through the front door after school, eyes wide with excitement. "Mom, I won 3rd place," he shouted, holding up a certificate. I hugged him so tight he could barely breathe. "See what happens when you let yourself be seen," I said. He grinned, and for the first time in a long time, it was a real, unforced smile that reached his eyes. That night, we celebrated with takeout pizza, his favorite. He talked more over dinner than he had in months. About school, about the contest, about how maybe he wanted to study art in college. I realized then that the boy who had once stood frozen in my doorway at 1:30 in the morning, too scared to admit he was falling apart, was slowly becoming someone new, someone stronger, someone lighter, someone who believed in tomorrow again. And even though there were still hard days ahead, I knew he wasn't carrying it alone anymore. Neither of us were. The next morning, Isaac left for school with his art contest certificate folded carefully in his backpack, like it was something precious. I stood at the door watching him walk away, thinking about how just a few months ago, I wasn't sure he even believed in himself anymore. Now here he was, carrying proof that he could try, that he could create, that he could win at something. It wasn't about the trophy or the certificate. It was about him finding a reason to keep going. Later that day, while cleaning his room, I found a small notebook under his pillow. I didn't open it because I respected his privacy, but I could see pages full of words and sketches peeking through the edges. He was writing again. That alone felt like a miracle because when he was at his lowest, he used to say he didn't even have the energy to think, let alone write or draw. When he came home, I asked him casually, "What's in the notebook?" He looked surprised. "How do you know about that?" "I saw it when I was cleaning," I said gently. "Don't worry, I didn't read it." He hesitated, then said quietly, "It's kind of like my thoughts. Stuff I can't really say out loud yet." I nodded slowly. "Sometimes it's easier to write things before you can say them. I used to do that too when I was younger." His eyes softened a little. "Did it help?" "Yeah," I said honestly. "It helped me see things clearer. And sometimes, it made me brave enough to talk about stuff I was scared to say before." He didn't answer right away, but later that night, I saw him sitting at his desk writing for almost an hour straight. It felt like another wall coming down, piece by piece. As weeks passed, his therapist noticed the changes too. During one session, she told me, "He's starting to process things in a healthier way now. He's expressing himself. He's letting people in. It's slow, but it's real progress." Those words stayed with me because for so long, progress felt impossible. Every time I thought he was getting better before, he would crash again, and I would feel like we were back at the beginning. But this time was different. This time, he wasn't pretending to be okay. He was actually working through it. One evening, he came into the living room carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. He handed one to me and sat down on the couch. "Mom," he said, staring at the floor. "I was thinking about that night, the one when I told you everything. I don't know what would have happened if you didn't listen the way you did." I felt my throat tighten. "I'm just glad you trusted me." He shook his head. "Nah, you don't get it. I didn't even trust myself then. But you didn't freak out. You didn't make me feel crazy. You just stayed." I didn't know what to say for a moment because hearing him talk like this made me realize how close I came to missing the signs before. How easy it would have been to brush it off, to tell him to toughen up, to treat it like just another bad day. But instead, I reached over and put my hand on his shoulder. "I stayed because I love you. That's it, no other reason." He didn't answer right away, but the way his shoulders relaxed told me he heard every word. Over the next few months, he kept paint writing, kept talking to his therapist. Some days were good, some were heavy, but he kept moving forward. And slowly, I saw the boy who once felt invisible start to find his voice. He even started volunteering at a local art center on weekends. The first time he mentioned it, I was shocked. "You, volunteering?" I teased. He smiled. "They needed someone to help little kids with painting." I figured why not. That was when it hit me. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was starting to give back. To share the thing that helped him heal with other people. That's when you know someone's really growing, when their pain turns into something that can help someone else. One night, as we drove home from the art center, he said quietly, "You know what I realized? I don't feel empty all the time anymore." I looked at him, and there was a softness in his eyes I hadn't seen in so long. "That's because you started letting life back in," I said. He nodded slowly, almost like he was still getting used to the idea. "Yeah, I guess I did." And as I drove us home that night, I realized something too. Sometimes healing doesn't come in one big moment. Sometimes it comes in pieces, a conversation here, a painting there, a small victory no one else even notices. Until one day, you look back and realize you climbed out of a place you thought you'd never escape. A few weeks later, Isaac's therapist invited a group for teenagers who had been struggling like he once was. At first, he said no. He told me, "I don't think I'm ready to talk about all that in front of strangers." I didn't push him. I just said, "That's okay. You'll know when you're ready." But a few days later, he came to me and said, "Maybe I should try it. What if there's someone in there feeling like I used to feel?" And that was the moment I knew something had shifted inside him. He wasn't just thinking about himself anymore. He was starting to see beyond his own pain. The first meeting, just 5 teenagers and a counselor sitting in a circle. He didn't talk much that day, but he listened. When he came home, he told me, "It was weird, but it wasn't as scary as I thought." By the third meeting, he shared his story. He told them about the night he almost gave up, about the notebook under his pillow, about painting storms on canvas until the chaos in his mind felt quieter. He said later, "When I finished talking, no one looked at me like I was broken. They just nodded. Like they understood." And that was when I realized how much he had grown. Months ago, he couldn't even look me in the eye and say how he felt. Now he was sitting in front of strangers, turning his pain into words that might someone else feel less alone. One afternoon, his school counselor called me. Isaac asked if he could put some of his paintings up in the hallway. She said, "We think it's a great idea." A week later, I walked into the school lobby and there were 4 canvases lined up on the wall, each one full of color and emotion. The storm painting was in the center. Underneath it was a small card with his name and a quote he had chosen, "Even the darkest night will end, and the sun will rise." I stood there staring at it, my eyes burning with tears, because I remembered the night he told me he didn't know if he could make it. And now here he was, letting the whole school see his journey through art. One evening I asked him, "Why did you pick that quote?" He shrugged lightly. "Because it's true. Nights don't last forever." I didn't believe that before, but now I kind of do. That night, as we sat on the couch watching TV, I realized something about healing. It doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't mean you forget the nights you cried yourself to sleep or the mornings you didn't want to get out of bed. It just means those things stop controlling you. They stop defining you. Isaac still had days where he felt heavy. He still had moments when he got quiet and distant. But now he had tools. He had people he could talk to. He had his paintings, his notebook, his support group. And he had himself. A version of himself that finally believed he deserved to keep living, to keep creating, to keep moving forward. A few months later, the arts center where he volunteered invited him to help with a small workshop for younger kids. He taught them how to mix colors, how to paint skies and trees, how to use art when words felt too hard. When he came home, he told me, one of the kids said painting made him feel less angry. I guess I kind of know what that's like. And I realized something else then. Sometimes the people who once felt the most broken become the ones who know how to help others heal. Because they understand. Because they've been there. One evening, as we were cleaning up after dinner, Isaac said, "You know, I used to hate the idea of talking about my feelings. Now I kind of want to tell my story one day. Like, really tell it. Maybe write about it." I smiled. "I think that would help a lot of people." He nodded. "Yeah. And maybe it would help me too." And in that moment, I understood that healing isn't just about surviving what hurt you. It's about turning it into something bigger than the pain itself. Something that gives it meaning.